Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. Apologies for the messy schedule this week. I delivered a pristine episode of Monday Markets on Monday, as was scheduled, and then Don decided to long the Dogecoin instead and, I don't know, talk about philosophy on Twitter. So here we are on Sunday, talking about Friday's price action, because that's how it works, right?
That is how it works. We're going to pretend that it's Friday.
Yes, and we're going to be completely correct about the weekend move, or lack thereof, Don. We're going to talk about your Dogecoin shilling. I obviously had a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment asking if you're going to hold it for more than 2 days this time. But on the BTC front, I think it's very interesting, and it has been for the past few weeks in general. So from when we last spoke, we had that essentially higher low retest type of thing into 58, 59k, which naturally missed all the orders I had there. So thanks for playing. Thank you very much. And in typical fashion, you know, when you get filled on a trade, it just immediately goes against you and it turns into a nothing burger. But God forbid you ever miss trade, it's going to be the best trade of your life, right? This is kind of a...
I mean, it does make sense, right? Because the trade idea was so good that it just doesn't come back. Like, it was so good that one, it didn't hit your orders because it was more bullish than you thought. And then two, because it's so good, it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
It's just a really
Sorry, am I supposed to feel good about any of that?
So at least you're like good at level selection. You
Perfect.
just got front man.
Yeah. 7 years and I'm good at level selection. Fantastic. Thank God level selection makes money, right?
I mean, yeah, that's the most important part.
There's kind of an interesting dynamic on the weekly time frame. I'm just going to skip past the monthly entirely for mostly obvious reasons.
Dude, no, the monthly looks so good.
Yes, I know, but how many times have we been here?
No, that is fair enough. That is actually.
Is there anything particularly special about the monthly where you're like, holy shit, compared to the last 7 months?
I mean, the candle's green, so...
Okay, yes, we definitely haven't had any of those, right?
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah, like last month's was so red, wasn't it, Don?
Oh yeah, terribly red.
That's why I just jumped through. I'm like, there's no way I will not be baited. The weekly is interesting in that I think there are like 2 things going on. One is the overarching kind of market structure discussion that keeps going back and forth. But I think if you look at the last couple of months since the August high, it's kind of forming a much more bullish looking short-term trend, right? So if you have like a zoomed out market structure point of view, like when we last spoke about it, for example, as always, I was correct and you were wrong, pointing out the 64k higher high being useful, whereas you were like, no, it's a FUD piece of shit. It's really the 68.2k level. So, I mean, I'll accept apologies at any time. I can do it off air so as not to embarrass you. But at this point, now that we're at the 68k big inflection point, it seems like if you're looking at it from that perspective, you just take the view that, oh, well, nothing's changed and we're still in the same consolidation, etc., which all of which is true. But then if you look at the weekly chart from like the 19th of August, that's kind of starting to get pretty uptrendy on its own, right? If you kind of just isolate that block of like a shorter term weekly trend, that's been pretty constructive in terms of higher highs and higher lows across the board. Do you agree? How do you balance those considerations with, you know, shorter term market structure versus the more zoomed out perspective? And what kind of secret tricks do you have on the weekly for us in general?
I mean, I've just been saying, like, I feel like it's going to go up, but technically speaking, we haven't really broken market structure. It does look better now to me, with that pullback into support and then bounce from it. That kind of solidifies the 64.3k level, you know, like before it's just kind of could have been just like a bounce into immediate death. Now that we actually retested the level, it seems like a little bit more significant. But yeah, the real significance would be closing above 68, 69k. Lower time frame wise, I mean, I've just been like closing my eyes, just praying that it's bullish, and that's been working so far. Yeah, technically speaking, everything shifts at 68, 69k. If that breaks, at that point, no one can argue that the market structure is bullish. And then we can finally go to 75 or 76. What? No, if it breaks 68, 69k, it's bullish.
No, like, you said no one can argue that it is bullish. I'm saying no one can argue that it isn't bullish, presumably.
Yeah.
Or I should have left that in. And, you know, if it breaks down, look, Don was right. And then if it breaks up, it's like, oh, he misspoke. He just said he was long.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's how you hedge, no?
Yes, exactly. So 68k is the big boy.
Yeah, I mean, it is the big boy, but to me, it just looks decent. I wouldn't necessarily want to be like, hey, like I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, we've been at this level before, it's been smacked down before, so I'm going to be bearish. And I don't really, like, if anything, I could be neutral here, but being bearish into this resistance that's been tested a bunch of time with lower time frame market structure that kind of does look like it's bullish, right? I wouldn't necessarily want to be in that position. Like, I don't see the point.
Where is sorry, go on.
I'd rather be bearish lower over here. Like, I don't short or I don't long into levels that have been tested like 3-4 times. I would most definitely not short into those. Because like for shorting, you need the best of the best, right? Like, because generally speaking, crypto goes up, or like at least Bitcoin goes up, right? So you need to have a really, really good, like really, really good setup. Whereas like with longing, you can sometimes take wonky ass setups because crypto generally tends to go up, right? So you don't have to be as selective with longs as with shorts, in my opinion. And then when you have a shitty setup, but you're like, oh yeah, but you would always take this on the long side, then the argument is kind of shitty, because generally speaking, this market has been going up only. Generally, markets tend to go up, so you have to be more selective. So that's why I don't like the argument so much, that you're like, oh, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, this is the exact same setup, just on the other side. I don't know. I don't like it too much.
Okay, fine. I mean, that makes sense. You know, essentially your strategy ends up being buy high, sell low. That's fine. As far as the specific weekly levels go, is it 68.2 based on that last weekly high? Have you dragged it back further to one of the earlier high closes?
Yeah.
The
It's
69K?
for me,
What is it?
69.6.
69.6. Okay.
Yeah, the prior high, like the one on June.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Okay, that's the one. What if it closes above? Here we go. What if it closes above 68.2 but below 69.6? I'm assuming 12K is the target at that point.
Yeah, I mean, then it's over. No, I mean, I just have 69.6, and anything before that wouldn't necessarily change my mind. Yeah. Generally, I mean, I'm just waiting for the breakout. I'm not necessarily waiting for like a bearish signal. The bearish signal for me would come lower. So if we lose 60K at this point, I think it would start looking quite shitty, quite
that's
fast.
Wide, eh?
Yeah, but I mean, I bought at 58, right? So I'm basically just ready to give back everything, but not much more than that. So
I mean, the entire move gets retraced at 62.4. Are you still holding at that point if it happens, for example?
62.4.
Like the bottom of this weekly candle. Like
yeah, I mean that would not be great, but would not necessarily like a close below 61.5 would be enough.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, it just generally like that's where I changed my mind. Right now I'm like in team. Okay, this is gonna go up. It is trading quite weak for it to look so strong. This is fucking weird to say, but I don't know if you're getting what I'm saying. But
yeah, I know completely what you're getting, especially on lower time frames. You're like, where's the urgency? Hello? Like,
yeah, like where we are right now, high time frame wise, you'd think that the market would trade stronger on the lower time frames, and just generally not just so apathetic.
Yeah, apathetically, whatever, sure.
But is what it is. We're just gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you'll recall when we had the weekly chart kind of develop last time, there was a two-part framework essentially that we discussed. One was, hey, you get a strong high time frame signal, you basically try to ape it, right? Be it on the lower time frames, be it on the next daily close, or just literally on the close itself. You're just doing business close to the level / targeting a shallow pullback. And then option 2 is you wait for a slightly deeper pullback after the break. The first one works because it's just kind of just momentum following through, right? And just strength on strength begets strength. And the second one works because if you get too much aggression, essentially trying to break out buy early, it's still bullish, but those guys get flushed out and then you kind of push up, right? And I think that's a useful framework in general, not just for market structure stuff, but just high time frame levels and closes, all that type of stuff. And we essentially had the second one play out to a reasonable extent thus far, right? We had the higher high, and then the next 2 weeks were down, essentially. Or we had like some attempt at a higher high or local breakout at 66K, that weekly candle. And then we had 2 weeks of down, and, hey ho, we're back up here now. So that was essentially the second model, if you will, playing out or something resembling it. Do you have a base case or expectations for up here, essentially? So now that we're pushing into another weekly resistance, weekly high, whatever you want to call it, we can go back to the old inflection point meme, which I absolutely love. We're
Yep.
at another weekly inflection point. What do you have like a view, either preferentially or in terms of what you think will happen as far as just send it versus another stair-steppy walk it up structure?
I mean, I'd be shocked if it was another stair-steppy walk-up structure. I think, like, if we break 69 on a closing basis, I would expect an impulse.
Acceleration.
Yeah, acceleration, impulse, not necessarily retest. I'm not necessarily, because I see a lot of people argue for like 150, 200K now that we've consolidated for 6 months, right? Like, this is how it goes. That people are like, yeah, we've consolidated for 6 to 9 months after a big move. So I'm just going to take the bottom of the first move, which is 16K, all the way to 70, and we're going to get an equal sized move. And then we're going to end up at 180K and everyone's going to be rich. I'm not necessarily in that camp.
How surprising.
I think generally my base case is right now that we're going to break out and it's going to get smacked down, as in, like, we're going to go to 80, 90, maybe 100K if this breaks out, and then we're going to go back down to 60. That's kind of my base case right now. And then have 60K be a base and do all that kind of like boring consolidation stuff. But my base case is we're going to break out, like, because a lot of people have been arguing with me that is very bearish, right? But my base case right now is we're going to go up, right? So that's not necessarily bearish. It's just, I think there's a good chance that the breakout doesn't really stick. Now, I think it's going to, like, we're going to then consolidate around 60 and then it might stick on the next attempt. It's just on this attempt, I'm not entirely sure. But I can change my mind, right? Like, if I'm bullish now and we go to 90K and then I just see bullishness everywhere, I can change my mind, right? I can be like, hey, my idea of what we're going to do when we get here is just one that I don't agree with anymore, and I can just change my mind and go with that. So I'm bullish for now, thinking we're gonna go higher. I don't think it's gonna stick, but I could change my mind once we're up there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's why having some semblance of an original idea is important. It's kind of what makes trading difficult, right? You should be somewhat bound to your original trade idea so you don't get lost in the source when it actually arrives. But at the same time, you need to be able to adjust your priors and sort of, incorporate new evidence into your thesis. What most people tend to do is they'll have like an original target, which is quite reasonable, all things considered. Then it gets there or starts being close, and they underestimate how radical the sentiment shift would be, etc., and they essentially flip on themselves, right? This also sometimes takes the form of like a specific price action cheerleading, where, and we've seen this happen a near infinite amount of times. You have like someone who's bullish, and they're right, but they just keep moving their bullish targets up as it approaches their original target, and there's no end to this process. And then when it breaks down or pulls back or starts retracing, or even when the trend is over, because they kept moving their targets up that entire time, they then contextualize all of those pullbacks not as trend breaks or it's fucking over or cyclical shifts or whatever. They're like, oh my god, I really have an opportunity now to get to my like final target, even though it's never gonna fucking happen, right? And the same happens on the way down as well. Market moving down, just move those support levels lower. So I think those are behaviors that are probably best avoided, but there's no easy answer here, which is a kind of recurring theme on the show. You have to both have some conviction in your original ideas, but at the same time be somewhat responsive enough to evidence if things are very different by the time you get there, or even before there or after there, whatever, just at all times, essentially.
And the evidence cannot only be like, hey, price is going up, right?
Hey, that's pretty fucking good though, right? Like,
No, because at the end of the day, like, if you're like, okay, the market is going to go to 100K, I'm targeting 100K, and then you're at 100K and you're like, oh yeah, but price went up, so I'm more bullish now. Like, that can never stop, right? Because then you can actually never have a proper target. But I think that's what a lot of people do. Like, oh, price went down, it's much more bearish than before, so I'm just gonna be more bearish, and when it goes up, the opposite. And then the the target can never be hit, basically.
Yeah, by definition, yeah.
And that is dangerous. The good thing for me, like my brain works like the lower it goes, the more bullish it gets, and the higher it goes, the more bearish it gets. So like even if I change my mind like at 80, 90K, I'm not gonna like have unrealistic targets, because for me, like we've had a strong move at that point. So maybe that was just the halfway point. We go now to like 120 or like 100, 110. And then at some point, my bearishness is gonna come through, and I'm gonna be like, okay, fuck this.
This much
Too
for one
much
Chinese
now.
Bitcoin? Like that
Exactly,
part of your
exactly.
brain?
And then I don't fall into this trap, but it's easy to do so, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
easy to get swept away with all the cheerleading that goes on the moment you get a breakout.
It's a pure echo chamber at that point, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
And the
even at this
vibes are
point.
gonna change. The
Oh,
vibes are gonna
absolutely.
shift, and everyone is gonna find so many reasons why they have to be bullish for all eternity.
Yes.
And yeah, that's just not necessarily how it is.
I mean, the thing you mentioned earlier was even quite funny, that you're like, hey, we're going to break out and go to all-time highs. And it's like, wow, why are you bearish? It's like, oh, dear, that's...
Yeah. I got a lot of that, actually. I was like, I did one tweet where I was like, yeah, it's going to be fun to see this breakout, and then kind of dump back down from 90 to where we are right now. And like half of the comments were like, dude, you're so miserably bearish. And I'm like,
Oh, my God.
what are you talking about? Like, like this is up 30-40%. Your altcoins might be up like 100, 200, 300, 400, 500% at that point, right? Like, where is that bearish in what world? But apparently, if your targets are not 1 million per coin, that is very bearish.
True. What's the point otherwise, Don? Believe in something.
Yeah, I
I
should.
saw this funny meme. It was like, believe in something, believes in some, coins someone else shills to them type of thing.
I mean, the dumb thing about that whole meme is that, like, those people that posted, they believe in nothing, right? Like, they only believe, like, the whole believe in something, I think would best be like if you're talking about the tech, because then
Sure.
like the price doesn't really matter, and you're like, hey, I believe in this tech, it's gonna go somewhere. That's where it originally comes from, right? But now people are like, believe in something, believe that this meme is gonna go to 10 million, and then you can dump on people. Like, that is not necessarily believing in something. The only thing you're believing in is the money you're gonna make, and that is not. I mean, that just
I don't
seems
know. That
wrong.
sounds great, Don. Study manifestation. Are you telling me you
Yeah.
don't believe in the money you're going to make?
Maybe. I mean, at the end of the day, I cannot shit talk these people too much, because that's all that I really care about too.
Yes.
Right. So, but I would never say, hey, I'm believing in something. I'm believing that this worthless piece of shit is gonna go to infinity. If anything, I would believe in my ability to make some money, but
You got to believe
different
in the
form.
US dollar at some point, right?
Oh yeah, I mean I think that's where it already starts going downhill for most of these people. Don't think that the dollar is necessarily something they believe in too much.
That's true. You got to rotate, take profit at some stage. There are no
Oh,
heroes
please.
hold. I mean, there are a couple of exceptions, obviously, but like there are no heroes holding ICOs and NFTs and food tokens from last cycle type of thing. They haven't been rewarded for believing in that paradigm
No.
shift in
If
particular.
anything, you should not believe in anything.
Yeah, I think thing is that sounds more crypto native, right? That should be more. I know we're mixing and muddling two topics of like philosophical belief and also like operating as a trader. But if
Yeah.
altcoin cycles have taught you anything, it's actually not to believe in a single fucking thing
Yeah.
until it's dollars in your bank account type of thing.
Yeah. The
This
only thing
industry
you
is
should
amazing at erasing wealth and round tripping it like no other.
Yeah, legit. And then people meet. I think because the gains are so big that people, like, no reasonable person would just stick with it, right? Like, imagine like you buy like this meme coin and you're up 10,000%, right? Like, no reasonable person would have actually held all that way,
Yes.
right? Like, you have to, like, you get into crypto with like $1,000, and then like your portfolio is at like 100,000, and the reasonable person would be like, hey, I'm gonna sell this and like use it as a down payment for my house. And the only people that like get like get this hero status are the ones that are completely mentally ill, and then just like, no, this is just the start, is gonna go to 10 million. And at the end of the day, like, if you time it right in the cycle, that's actually the way to go, right? But 99% of the people that will think that way will just round trip everything, and we've seen it so many times.
Also, Don, you keep snitching on yourself by saying 10 million. Those are some baby market caps. What are you talking about?
I mean, that's what everyone trades. That's kind of the crazy state of the market right now, right? Like people are literally trading stuff that we wouldn't have touched with a 10-foot pole like in 2016, 17, because the market caps would have been too small. And the market is so much bigger now.
Yes.
So like it's a little bit of the market is in an odd state right now. I'll put it that way. But yeah, I think the reason why people go and round trip so much is because they get taught during the bull run that if you sell early, everyone's gonna get rich besides you. And then like they get taught these bad habits, and the moment they're finally gonna understand, like, hey, I need to hold, is the moment where the entire cycle is just gonna be over, and you're gonna lose 90% of the money. That's just kind of how crypto does it. Like a lot of gains that are really hard to capture, and then you think, okay, I just got to turn my brain off entirely, and that's where you just completely like get wrecked. And for
Especially
some
if
reason,
it's your first cycle, right? That tends to be so pronounced.
And for some reason, it hits everyone, right? Like it hits 90% every time. Like 90% of the people. Crypto goes so far to capture everyone in a way, and then like in a dumb way of thinking, and then it rugs. This is just the crypto story.
Well, I think it's the same mental illness that you need to actually hold this through those valuations, through those moves, and to that extent, that's the same mental illness that stops you from selling.
Yeah,
it's two sides of the same coin. So you see these like massive P&Ls and whatever else. I mean, obviously a lot of them are fake and that type of stuff. But like the average life cycle, and there've been so many of these, you need to be like, as you mentioned, mentally ill, fully delusional to hold it to that point. But it's also then very unlikely that at the top, near the top, or at some point, something just clicks and you become this like very measured, sober, reasonable person who's like, yep, okay, time to wrap that part up and, take profit and rotate. Whatever. It just doesn't happen. That same mental illness that gets you the gains is often the same mental illness that takes them away. And yeah, there are a lot of other dynamics at play there, right? Like the liquidity available on some of these relative to just like trading volume and all the unrealized P&Ls. That tends to be rough. I also think people assume that when they choose to sell, it's like, oh, well, if it starts going down, I'll sell it. It's like, that's that's pretty curious. It's like, you know how it usually goes, right? Like you're holding this thing and you get the first real breakdown / pullback. 9 times out of 10, you're actually buying that breakdown / pullback. So you're like, oh, this is like another opportunity to add to my bags or whatever.
Yep.
And
you're like,
go on.
You're like, oh yeah, fuck this. Fuck these people. Like even like you go that far, you're like, fuck these people that like push this down, I'm gonna add some, and then because this is a great opportunity because it's down like 30-40%, and then you will, I totally agree, you're more likely to add to your position than to actually take profit. And the worst part is like you see the number, right? Because that is something that everyone will do. This is the thing that is kind of like akin to gambling. You see the unrealized P&L, or you see how much your bag is worth, right, in your portfolio, and you think you own that money, right? Even if you don't sell the coin. Like in your head, like if your coin went from 1,000 to 1 million, you think you have 1 million now, but that's not necessarily the case, right? Like the moment you sell, you have that money, but until then, it's just all fictional. And what people think, like when it goes from 1 million down to 600K, they're like, that's so much money that I just lost, and I don't want to like end on a loss or like just like close now that I lost 400K. But you didn't lose 400K. It was never there to begin with because you didn't realize anything, right? People are just thinking of it like in a warped way. And I think that's just very human, that you think you own it even if you don't yet. It's just that kind of number game fucks people over so hard when they kind of calculate how much they have and how much they're gonna have, and they see this as like they have 1 million and they're like, okay, now I have 1 million, I could buy this house. Yeah, everyone's gone through it before. I've gone through it before.
Same.
You've gone through
absolutely.
it before. Where you look at your portfolio and you're like, oh shit, like I have a lot of money now, without having sold anything, right?
yeah.
And it's like, no, you don't, dude. You have a bunch of worthless tokens that might be worth more or might be worth less, but you don't actually have money, right? It's just a bunch of tokens that might be money in the future if you eventually sell,
Yes.
but they are not right now, and that is kind of something that people fuck up all the time.
I mean, that kind of thing has screwed us over on like BTC and ETH and high cap coins in the past, right? Like you're holding a chunky position through a trend. The first trend breaks, you add a bit, it bounces a tiny bit, you feel great about it, and then it nukes. And by the time you zoom out and look at it, you're like, okay, it pulled back like 20%, it bounced, and then it pulled back another 20%. I'm down like a lot, basically.
Yeah.
And then at that point, the issue is when the sort of trend shifts, cycle shifts, whatever, you also can't assume, and this is like what the NFT guys got like very fundamentally wrong. You always assume that the liquidity that is available during the bull market is also the liquidity that will magically be there when you actually choose to sell.
Yeah.
And that's often not the case. Like by definition, you should add some sort of, well, I say some sort of, especially with a lot of these new coins, you should add a massive discount to your unrealized P&L, especially if you were sort of early or have a large position or going to have large market impact. Because if you sell late, by definition, you're going to incur like a ton of slippage and you're already down in your position. And even if you're the one initiating the selling, the chances that you have like a very adverse effect on the liquidity if you're big enough early enough is also bad. So then you start thinking about it and you start adding all these discounts to your unrealized P&L. You know, discount number one, like I'm not going to sell at the top. Discount number two, there's a good chance that when the trend actually reverses or breaks, I buy it the first time around and lose some money. You know, discount number three, when I actually decide to sell, I'm going to assume that my timing is going to be shit and liquidity is going to be worse, which means more slippage. And I think all of these just sound doomerish, but they're actually quite reasonable and smart considerations. And by the time you start it, you get like a more realistic real world model of how much of this, and also like, I'm sorry to say, I guess, taxes, right? That's another thing that like kind of exists in most jurisdictions, and jail is kind of bad. So once you add even just those four things, and that's like surface level shit, whatever unrealized P&L or, you know, wallet balance that you hold, you get a much more sober view of that. And I know it sounds like boring old man cred, you're not even in the trenches, you don't trade, this kind of stuff. But I've been through this exact experience like a ton of times trading in general over the past 7 years. So I just think like it's a nice model to have, to just be somewhat aware of these discounts that apply to whatever P&L you think you might have, so that you're not very, very unpleasantly surprised if you're not the god perfect trader who just manages to, you know, go from mentally ill to massively sober and sell the top and, you know, not experience any of those things.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, like there's no real easy answer to all of that, right? Like you cannot really just be like, oh yeah, you just need to do this and then you're gonna avoid all of these pitfalls. You guys are probably gonna have to go through it, right? Like the people that are new, they're probably gonna just have to go through it once to actually or like internalize all of this. But yeah, anyone that's been around for a cycle or two knows that this is just how it is.
Yeah, this is very real. Like, this isn't speculation. This is played out over and over again. We've both been on the right and wrong end of it. My so-called solution to it has always just been to sell, you know, as a result of my actions, it's always been sort of selling early and giving back less. So the model that I've sort of gravitated towards is knowingly making less and selling earlier, but keeping way more of it. And then the other extreme is essentially the opposite of that, right? Where you let the P&L go haywire, but then you sort of mentally understand that maybe you won't lose 5 to 15%, but you lose like 50 to 60%. So it better be worth it, essentially, if you hold through like a large enough P&L. Those tend to be the two kind of extremes, I guess, and most people land in neither of them, actually. So.
Yep. Yeah. Now I think one good thing, like I saw this on Twitter one day, like a couple of years ago. Someone said like, hey, if you can change your lifestyle significantly in a way that you want to, obviously, with 25% of what you have, then do it even if you think that the market is gonna go higher. Because if you just keep doing that, right, just basically like if the money is enough, like for example, like let's say that down payment that you always wanted, right? You can easily afford it with like a quarter of what you have in crypto, but you think it's gonna go much higher. I mean, just fucking do it, right? Like, it's not gonna be the end of the world if you're gonna make like if that 25% of your crypto portfolio is gonna be gone, but you're gonna kind of level up in real life for like a marginal cost of the crypto balance, and I think that's almost always worth it, especially given that then if you fuck everything up, you still took something out of the whole ordeal, right? Like you're still leveled up. And I think just generally like that's the way to do it. Just like incrementally, like just level yourself up and then just be like, okay, I can take everything else in the crypto market. At least I'm not going to round trip and go back to how things used to be. And I think like just straight up, it's one of the better things. Like you can obviously make the number yourself. Like you can be like, hey, I need to. It needs to be like 10% of my crypto portfolio to change my real life. I think that's a little bit low, but just generally, like an exit plan like that makes a lot of sense. And it's not really exit anyway, right? Like most of their money would still be in crypto. It's just a way of kind of just making sure you don't fuck up, because I've seen a lot of people go from very little to infinite money to very little again, and it just kind of breaks them. Like we've had people in prior cycles. I remember one individual that kind of got on like a car with guns and shot in the air and went completely fucking crazy when he lost a bunch of money in crypto, because he basically went from like a lot to nothing again. And like people lose their minds, like literally lose their minds when they go through this. And if you can avoid that at least, and just make sure that you stick some of it, like you stick the landing at least by default, no matter what happens. I think that's the way to go. So that's just my advice on that front.
Yes,
Just
but you're not in the
don't be
trenches.
stupid.
You're a boomer, old head, washed uncle who doesn't know anything. Negative 1,000 aura. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But at the end of the day, like, if you're in the trenches and you make so much money, you can make that 10, 15, 20, 25% back in one day, right? So what's the big deal?
What's the big deal? Yeah. Don, we were on the weekly chart before we started talking shit.
Yeah.
The only other question I had with regard to the weekly is someone may have listened to the first part, and Don is talking about 100k BTC, it's breaking up, close your eyes, etc.
Yeah.
If someone's trading on lower time frames, is there any weekly close or anything on the weekly which could look a bit shitty for 1 to 2 weeks, be it a pullback or reaction off the range high or some sort of close or failed breakout, just sort of a short-term red flag on the weekly, which would suggest, at least from a time perspective, that the market isn't quite ready yet? Since we're at an inflection point, TM.
I mean, we are at an inflection point, so I don't think you're gonna get anything of the sort. Like, I think if we go back to 62 and then break it, like that's terrible. And I would not think that that's just a temporary roadblock. I think that would lead to significant pullback. If like so, and if we break 68, 69k, I think it's probably gonna go right. So we are in an area where there's not that much room. Like if you're looking for like a dip to buy, if you're buying a dip, I think you might get more of a dip. And the only thing that you can really do is buy into strength, and then you might get you might get rolled over.
Fantastic.
Given how it's trading. But right now it's a little bit difficult. Last week was that's where like the last week and the week before, right? Those tiny red candles that we got, those were the pullbacks. I think that were kind of like that roadblock. We talked about it too, right? We're like, oh, this is into support. Like that's like it's not the end of the world. Turns out it wasn't. Right now, if it goes back into that support, I'd get a lot more nervous than I was a week or two ago.
I was like, hey, what are you doing back here?
Yeah, like why? Like why are we trading back? Yeah. I don't like it. So
Fine.
There's no real pullback that I would necessarily like, unless like if it pulls back, I'd look at 52 instead of anything in the 60s.
What the fuck?
So either you go now or just, I mean, give me something deep like 52 or 44.
Okay, fine. I mean, it makes your decision making very straightforward, but
yeah, I don't like it's very.
So if the market pulls
polarized
back,
right
it's
now.
over, is what Don is saying essentially.
Yeah, like properly. I mean, obviously, like if we pull back to 64 intra week, I'm not gonna lose my shit. But if we start closing below 62, then there might be some panic selling from me.
Some tweets that need to be deleted.
Oh yeah, especially the Dogecoin ones.
Especially the Dogecoin ones. I mean, the weekly's pretty thorough. Is there anything on the daily that stands out or isn't visible on the weekly time frame? This is
I
your
mean,
lower time frame chart, by the way, that you tweeted, which I found hilarious and very on brand.
which one?
You tweeted the daily chart saying it's a low time frame chart.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
shit was hilarious.
I mean, I haven't looked in the 4 hour in a long time. Like for me, the daily is literally like I'm not even memeing.
Oh, I know, unfortunately.
For me, the daily is literally the low time
So
frame.
what's your scalping daily time frame telling you, Don?
I mean, we went from like 65. Like I basically had a range here, and we are at range resistance right now at 68.450. That prior high in July, and I mean it goes all the way back for me at least to March
March. I
actually.
fucking knew it. That's what I put on the chart first. I was
Yeah,
like, what's the most archaic, chopped up piece of shit level I can find on this thing? And,
exactly.
and here it
And
is, lo and
that's
behold.
yeah. So that's where I have the level from. That's where we are right now. But we've been there before, right? Like this level's been tested a bunch, and we had a really strong nuke from this level, which makes me like I don't think it's a good level anymore. Like we've used it and it nuked, but it was not enough to drive price lower. We had a bunch of bearish news, right? Like we had the Germans selling, we had the American government selling, we had a bunch of like Mt. Gox stuff. We had so much basically forced selling or like selling from individuals or corporations that don't really give a fuck about price. All of that went through, and we're back at the same level, right? So, like to me, it doesn't really make much sense to be bearish at this level, but it is still resistance. So maybe we'll get a little bit of a low time frame pullback, but I'm not expecting another move like we've had before. I'm just cautiously bullish, even though we are at resistance.
Yeah, cautiously bullish at resistance. Gotta love it.
Yeah.
Next
You
next
go.
on next week's episode, cautiously bearish at support.
It would actually be true too. Like if it actually nukes, then I'd probably be cautiously bearish at
I
support.
fucking love this show sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
Go on.
like at these kind of important points, that's just kind of how it goes, right? Like when you have a high time frame like we have right now with the monthly and the weekly just looking giga chad, you just gotta be like those overrule your low time frames, and then sometimes you have like you're at resistance, and you get a bunch of people shorting that resistance, and then it actually just acts as the fuel that you need for the high time frames to break out, right? So like, I think it makes sense in limit like obviously not everywhere. You don't want to be always bullish at resistance and bearish at support, but in some like at some points in the market cycle and at some points in the chart, it just makes a lot of sense to just kind of be like, hey, this is just a temporary roadblock. I don't want to throw over my entire high time frame thesis just because the low time frames hit a support or resistance.
Yes, it's just like time frame hierarchy,
Yeah.
essentially. It's like when you have a high time frame support and the low time frames start looking shit. You know, if anything, you should be thinking that you're getting a good entry versus the low time frames overriding the high time frames, so to speak. At least in most cases. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, it's not always the case.
No,
but
exactly.
Yeah.
You are above water on ETH, right?
I am, yeah. I am.
Fantastic. Congratulations, first and
Thank you.
foremost.
I mean, that's a big thing, huh?
It's a big thing. Any updated either views or invalidations or takes on ETH BTC, or what's your ETH brain telling you?
I actually haven't looked at ETH BTC, it just depresses me in a while. But ETH USD is just in this ascending triangle. I posted about it actually on Twitter.
Yeah, I fucking showed it to you a week ago.
Exactly, I stole it from you and claimed it as mine.
Fantastic.
And I'll just stick with that. We'll see how it goes.
Just a big triangle, basically, right?
Yeah. And the cool thing with this triangle is that, like, if it actually breaks down, like, the longer this takes, the invalidation goes higher and higher and higher, right? So, like, if we haven't moved till December, the invalidation is gonna be basically above my entry, right? So, I'm just not stressing it. I'm just giving it the time it needs. But yeah, I mean, if this breaks out, it looks quite good. Like, this is a good base. at least on the daily time frame. The other time frames, like the weekly, honestly, like also not that bad, right? At this point, it was quite bad for a little bit, but like it's just coiling up or down,
It's
depending on how you
coiling.
look at it.
Yeah.
It's coiling.
It's the same triangle shit structure, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, you
like
can.
what makes up a triangle is higher lows and lower highs, which compress into a consolidation that eventually
Yeah.
breaks. So kind of the daily time frame has more candles, so the triangle looks cleaner. But you could do the same shit on the weekly if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, on the weekly you can just have a triangle. On the daily, it's like an ascending triangle. So you can pick whatever you prefer.
Pick the
But
bullish one.
yeah, that's the. I think the daily is a little bit better than the weekly. But we are trading back above 2.5k. That was where I was kind of like, this is really where I would want to go back above of. Like,
Yes.
and that's what we've done. And now it's just basically we just need to break that prior high at 2.7k, and then it actually starts looking even decent on the weekly time frame. The ETH chart hasn't done anything; just
Sure.
kind of looks like nothing.
I mean, that's impressive by BTC standards that it's not down like another 5%.
It's true, and it's actually like a lot of the other coins are down versus Bitcoin, right? So like at least it's holding.
Dude, ETH BTC weekly, it's just that. My
Yeah,
God.
like all of it. ETH BTC monthly is also fucking sad.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's still at monthly support, and it's still hanging on the weekly. But obviously, ETH BTC not the best chart. I like ETH USD. I'm not the biggest fan of ETH BTC. I just close my eyes and hope my boomer coins are gonna come through
Rapidly
eventually.
repriced.
Yeah, please.
Speaking of boomer coins, you were back in the trenches manipulating Dogecoin, if Twitter's
Oh
comments are
yeah.
to be believed. Which in itself was like very funny to read, considering the meta and actual
Dude, yeah.
influencers impacting actual shit coins. And then you tweet
Yeah.
about Dogecoins, like, this is suspicious. It's like, really, is it now?
Like, what? This is one of the biggest assets in crypto, and people are like, yeah, you're manipulating it. Funniest thing is, like, Elon's been trying to pump this thing for months, if not years now, right? Like tweeting about it a bunch, doesn't move, right? And then apparently I'm the one that moves it by like tweeting about my position. I don't think so. It's just like, and this is something that people kind of like, and it is a different, like a difficult line to kind of draw. But when someone tweets about something that actually like is just bullish and it goes up, that's not necessarily because people are buying it that are seeing the tweet. It's just because that thing was gonna go up, right? It's like me talking about Bitcoin at 16k, right? You could argue like, hey, Don just bull tweeted 16k so much that everyone bought and now it went up. That thing was going up no matter what I tweeted, right? I could have tweeted this Bitcoin to zero, wouldn't have changed anything. And I think it's the same with Dogecoin here, where it was just like the chart was good. The positioning was obviously bullish. And then, I mean, it's gonna go up no matter what I do. Whereas with the small shit, like small cap shit coins, that's very different, right? Like there's only one outcome when someone with a big following tweets about a 1 million market cap coin, and that's that it goes up, right? With Doge, that's too big of a coin. Too good liquidity doesn't really change anything.
Thank you for dispelling the rumors that you're manipulating a top whatever crypto.
It's if someone came to me and it's like, hey, when you're tweeting about Tesla, you're manipulating that chart. I'm like,
Jesus Christ.
just fuck off. Like that's not how it works, you know.
Are you still holding it though, Don? Because it's been more than 2 days.
I'm still holding it. Yeah.
Okay. And is your target still $1?
I mean, that's the meme target. I have a higher, like I think generally we're either gonna stop in between 0.5 and 0.8, so before the dollar is hit, or we're gonna go to 1.5 to $2 instead.
Jesus. Okay. Just a 10x on a top, whatever
Yeah.
market cap. Nice.
Yeah.
Where is Dogecoin in the market cap thing? I keep saying
8.
top.
Top
yeah,
8.
So top 10 in general. Jesus.
Yeah,
okay.
top 10. It's 19. It's 20 billion now. I
yes.
think.
Fine.
Which is a lot, and if it goes like up, and this is something that I always have issues with when people are like, hey, this is gonna, like, the chart looks so good, it's gonna 10x and it's a big market cap coin. I'm like, you guys are like so unrealistic, right? It makes no sense. Doge kind of reminds me of like in 2017 of XRP,
Oh,
where
fine.
XRP was already big, and people were like, this makes no sense. Like this makes no sense to go up, and then it went up to basically flip. I mean, it flipped ETH. It kind of flipped Bitcoin in market cap for a little bit, at least in an FTV, right? Like fully diluted.
Yeah, so there
It
was
was
some weird
actually
metric. Yeah.
yeah. Basically, if all the XRP was actually
Yes.
out in the
Yes.
market, that whole thing was bigger than Bitcoin, which was fucking insane. That was
Insane, right?
2017. So I think if this market goes crazy, right? Like if we get that blow of leg of Bitcoin from 70 to like 80, 90, 100K, I think there's a chance that Doge goes like XRP did back then, which was basically XRP was a big market cap and it went 10x anyway. I think Doge could do the same, but it really doesn't have to and could just fizzle out, especially if we don't get the media attention. So for that to happen, for us to go like above zero, like above 0.75, above 0.8 on Doge, I think you would have to have something crazy happen. And that is impossible to predict. Like if Doge goes up a little bit, does the media take notice? Does it not? I just don't know. So it would have to go like something outside of crypto would have to happen. For Doge to just go to like 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, nothing significant has to happen, right? Like that can just be
Crypto
crypto,
native.
yeah,
Yeah.
crypto native. Anything above one would have to be completely and utterly crazy in the real world.
Yeah, because that was like Elon SNL
Yes,
fresh type of bullshit, right?
yes.
It's pretty hard to top. No pun
So
intended.
So it's not like that's what I'm targeting necessarily.
Fine.
I'm just like if Bitcoin goes and breaks out and actually gets eyes on, and if Dogecoin then trades well, which is also a big if, right? Dogecoin's not necessarily been the coin that's been trading well, just generally ever since Elon just pissed all over it. So like there's a bunch of big ifs. I just liked it at 0.12. That's why I bought it. Originally we talked about Doge and I was like at 0.1 it's interesting, and then at the like I didn't buy it. I bought it more expensively at a little bit higher price. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at. I basically think Dogecoin could be the coin that the eyes of the public kind of turn
Fine.
to if the market breaks out. If the market doesn't break out and just fizzles out, this thing is going to fizzle out too. And then you got to be really careful what you do.
If someone wants a piece of this idea, Don, how at least at this point, if you're right, I mean there are
Yeah.
assumptions laid into it, right? That Doge trades well, cycle breakout type of shit, attention. There are obviously a bunch of caveats as you'd expect.
Yeah.
But let's say it does go towards even the first trouble area you mentioned of like close to the former high, etc. That's a shitload of space until we get there, right?
Yeah.
From the current chart. If someone wants a piece of this idea, they're like, hey, maybe Don's right. I don't know. I can't think for myself. So
I mean, I don't know myself. I'm just like, hey,
from a
Dogecoin's pretty
positioning
good.
perspective, though, how
Yes.
would you frame this? Is it something as simple as invalidation at the weekly low, pray, let it ride type of thing, or is there some more sophistication that's required?
I think that's actually not that bad at this point.
Okay,
But yeah, like at this point, Dogecoin went up for the last 6 days in a row, right? Like just green candle after green candle after green candle on both Doge BTC. Although actually on Doge BTC, it's only the last four, but still, like it's been going up nonstop. So it's really hard for these kind of like at this point to get a decent entry, because if it pulls back too much, that would kill the momentum. And then do you actually want to own it? Because then it could take another 6 months to play out. And yeah, so like it's difficult. So like the entry or like the exit, the stop loss, whatever you want to call it, would have to be quite wide, because I mean this weekly candle is currently up 30% ish.
nice. Love
Um,
those entries.
so you're basically your invalidation would be like being below that weekly candle, and that's like 30% lower. It's not necessarily fun.
Not fun, but
Um,
then if your target, I mean, this is where you sort of, I think, blend trading and investing, right? Because from a
yes,
trading
you
perspective,
have
this
to.
would be insane.
Yeah, you have
But
to.
from a cyclical, whatever, multi-layered assumptions bet type of thing, you can. I mean, this is what people end up doing. I think most times they don't have a good entry, and so if they were to take the market where it is and play close to the market, their invalidation would just be shit, and the entry there's nothing special about it, etc. And so the crutch they use is to just put a massive fucking target on it, and then it's like, oh look, well it's like a 4 hour trade. This is fine.
Yeah.
I think that's really common in just like trading in general. No one wants the 1 to 2 hour higher probability trades that you can size up for. And if they really just want a piece of something, be it due to FOMO or anything else, but can't justify it with their sort of usual trading parameters, the number one hack they don't want you to know about is just to fucking widen your target arbitrarily, and suddenly the trade becomes very palatable.
Yeah,
But that kind of
it's not.
applies in this case, though, right? That's
It
essentially.
does, yeah. I mean, basically, you're taking an investment with a stop loss.
Oh my god, that's so
Very,
cursed.
very wide fucking stop loss. And yeah, I mean, I agree. It's fucking cursed. It's difficult. These kind of things, like trading these kind of things, is difficult. I don't know the best solution to it. I mean, I'm just quite happy that I got the entry that I got, because it was like you have to go to the 4 hour, and I basically bought the lows on that. I
What,
actually
one,
to
two?
the
Or
yeah,
lower?
0.12,
I fucking thought so.
all of that was where I was buying. A little bit higher, a little bit lower, but yeah. I mean, I've been buying for like even before, like when it started moving up, I started buying, and then it pulled back and I continued buying. But yeah, basically, like it's hard. Like these kind of things, like you kind of have to zoom out to get an entry at this point in time, I think. Or you zoom in a lot and then you just take a bullish setup that you get. Like those are the two things. Like you zoom out and you have like a wide stop loss and you just pray to God that it doesn't hit, because it's gonna take a lot. It's gonna take a large chunk of what you actually put in from you. Or you zoom in and then you take the first bullish like setup that you find and you just target like a lot,
Yeah.
right? Those are the two ways to do it. Problem with the second way is that there's a chance that you still get chopped out, because on that, like as any other bullish trade, you would have a stop loss, obviously, and that would be tighter. And then there's a chance that you get stopped out and it still goes higher. So like there's no good way to go about it. But I like Doge as kind of like a, okay, we're gonna get outside attention again play. Like that's the only reason why I'm looking at Doge, just because I think like the whole meme thing has been the meta this cycle, right? And I think that's gonna, like, people that come from outside will know, like, this is something that everyone in crypto talks about. And all of those people have been in contact with crypto before. It's not like prior cycles where people didn't know what the fuck crypto was. Like even 70, 80-year-old people know crypto, and like they know like Dogecoin, right? And if they're like, if you get like any kind of exposure to the space that isn't necessarily Bitcoin, I think at this point you're gonna get shit memes and you're just gonna buy Doge. So if you get, and it's like I said, a big if you get people from outside, I think they're gonna look into buying Doge as a first step. It might kind of meander down into shitty, dumb bullshit memes, which would break my heart. But at the start, I think it would be Dogecoin. If it doesn't happen, I think Dogecoin is cursed because it's a big market cap asset already. And maintaining like high prices on something that has infinite supply, right? Like Dogecoin grows every single year without a cap like Bitcoin does. That's not necessarily the best, right? So
Well, Bitcoin has a cap, right? Just before we get flamed.
yeah, that's why I said like Dogecoin doesn't and Bitcoin
Yes,
does,
yes,
right?
yes. Sorry.
I don't know if I said it the right way, but basically Dogecoin like inflates
Yep.
for forever, and so that's like a limited time play. I just think like all of those people sitting outside of crypto would be buying Doge if they got back into it. If they
Getting the
don't get
dust
back
off
into
their
it,
Coinbase accounts done, you know?
yeah, Coinbase and Robinhood, all of
Oh,
those.
yeah. Sorry, go
That's
on.
where they would buy. if they don't come in, it's a lost play. Basically, I don't think Dogecoin natively would necessarily go. I think right now it's basically, and I think the reason why it's going up right now is basically people realizing that that's a meme play that the outsiders would come into, like one with enough liquidity for bigger guys to play too, right? It's not like these like 1 million market cap coins, not like a fund can buy that. But if a fund wants to have meme exposure in a big way, they could buy those, right? They can also like, there's a few more memes that are decent liquidity, but I think Dogecoin is the biggest one. So that's kind of the idea behind it. So far, it's going quite well. We'll see how it continues to do. But it's definitely not me pumping it. I swear to God, if I read that one more time, I'm gonna lose my mind. It's not
whatever's left of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like my followers have a lot of money.
Not from watching this show, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
They sold the 60k BTC range though, like 8 times in a row.
Yeah, but it did work once.
It did work once. That's all that matters. Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. So essentially, also I was kind of memeing this when speaking to you, being like Dogecoin must be the sort of maximum palatable meme coin for you, Don.
Oh, it is.
Everything
yeah.
else is just too new, too meta, too trenchy.
It's
Whatever.
too bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Dogecoin is memey enough and boomer enough. There's literally only one coin that fits those categories. So if you're over the age of 90 in crypto terms, like Don, and you want meme exposure, realistically, it's going to be Dogecoin.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few more that I like.
Whiff. Tell me about Whiff, Don.
No, I can, but it's not one of them.
Oh, okay. Give me your meme coin chills. This is great.
I mean, like, but this is not a shill, and this is already up a shitload. But the whole goat thing, I find fucking hilarious.
Oh, I see. Okay,
yeah, the whole like AI started a meme coin,
but it didn't, right?
Yeah, it didn't. It doesn't like I don't think it did. I don't think it matters though.
Yes, that's true. It's a narrative.
Yeah. People are so hung up on whether it actually happened or not. They don't realize that it doesn't really matter. Like, this is something that people always do. They get lost in the details, right? Because you just need this to run with the whole, like, the AI started it, and then it, like, that's the narrative, right? And it doesn't really matter what the truth is nowadays. Just generally in every way of life, like, doesn't really matter what the truth is. Just matters what people think. And in this case, they think that the AI started it, so that's how it is. And like, that's, I read it and I was like, okay, this shit's gonna go up. Like, it just makes sense. And it did go up like a shitload. Since I saw it first, I was way too lazy to buy any. But that one, for example, I'm like, that's new, right? That's like something that's funny. And that has like a little bit more brain in it than just like a random token that someone made because whatever, they think it's funny. And like, just generally, like, that kind of vibe in memes I find much better. It's why I don't necessarily like the mindless, oh yeah, this just has a hat, this just has this and that.
Or like, celebrity coins, remember those?
Yeah, no, celebrity coins, like, I find that pretty boring. There's memes that are funny, like the Bitcoin people, for example, the Sonic, Inu, whatever, like, that makes me laugh because I think, like, if that was ever mentioned on the news or something, right? Because if it got big enough to actually make headlines, that'd be fucking funny, you know?
That would be funny. The ticker is Bitcoin, yeah.
The ticker is Bitcoin, and then Obama Sonic, like, people would be like, what the fuck is this dumb shit? Like, that's funny, you know? But then you have like these dumb things all over the place, where I'm just like, this is just brain rot, right? This is not funny. This is just dumb. And obviously, like, that applies to a lot of the memes. I think that applies to 99% of them, where I'm just like, just leave it. Like, this is not funny. This is not cute. This is just stupid. And then obviously, like, if you make money with it, I'm happy for you. But this is not something that I necessarily want to subject myself to. Like, I literally see how I'm losing brain cells just thinking about these things. But the innovative, but the things with the story I actually like, and that's why I like the AI thing, just because I find it like there's a little bit more to it, even though it's probably not true. What they kind of say.
I mean, you can quantify this, right? Like that goat story, truth terminal, etc. It's spilled out into the VC community. It's spilled out into the AI community. So it's a bit stickier than just like pure Cabal Insider PvP meme coin up for 2 days and
Exactly.
then people
I mean, it makes
delete their
sense too,
accounts.
right? Like that's actually a story. Like that's actually a
Yes.
story that you can do something with, right? Whereas the other shit is just like copy paste of low effort shit,
Yeah.
which is I find just boring. Like, yeah, you make money with it, cool, but it's a boring thing, and people don't realize how many people are losing on these two, right? It's
But
not
I've
like
seen so many
everyone.
P&L screenshots on my For You
Yeah.
tab, Don. What are you talking about?
Yeah, most of them are fake, and the ones that are not are from people with like 100K followers that got famous trading memes, and now people trail them and
Yes.
their wallets. Like they buy a meme and they auto win because a bunch of people trail them.
Pretty good way to live, dude.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you don't even have to shill it, if you just have to buy it to shill it, like that's a pretty good way to go about it.
You've got a homemade momentum ignition machine. That's great.
Yeah, and you don't have to risk anything
They have
for
to
it too.
risk anything, yeah. I think this raises an interesting question as far as memes go, which is, you know how in the past a really good cyclical signal would essentially be either just froth in that Dino coins pumping, or like, oh, we're pumping utter dog shit. Another one used to be that innovation stopped and you started getting clones, copycats that just the rate of them and the frequency and the effort. So rate and frequency went up and effort went down. And so even if you had a narrative that was initially quite new, sexy, and attractive, and I think like DeFi food tokens is a good example there, and some NFTs, etc. Like once the original stuff gets stale and the copycats become zero effort and take over, that has tended to be a sort of local froth signal of sorts, right?
Yeah,
So you've had
yeah.
like dog shit pumping being one, Dino coins pumping being one. We've had copycat proliferation being another one. What do you think any of those are still? I mean, memes kind of changed a lot of those signals essentially. How do you think that framework applies to the current meta, if at all, or do we just have to like reconsider our priors entirely? Like, can you have froth within froth type of thing? Is that still valid?
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. I think it's a little bit different now than it used to be, based on that the memes that are being played are so low market cap, and so like it's a very small subset of people that are actually playing them. And it's not necessarily the big money, right? It's all the small money. So basically, if you get a bunch of froth in that, you can get sector-wide pullbacks on the meme coins where that don't really impact the rest of the market too much. And I think that's basically what we're getting. We had Bitcoin range a bunch, and memes went through an entire cycle. And it's basically because it's a it's just a bunch of people with very little money that are trading very small coins, and it's not like it's pulling new retail in. It's just a bunch of crypto natives losing their money, right? They're like over time that money flows out like 1 or 2% of the volume that gets transacted. I mean, it goes to devs, goes to rug pullers, goes to whatever. And if that goes on long enough, there's not enough money, and then the entire sector, like that small meme sector, collapses. Basically, that's basically I think what we went through in the last few months, and then it kind of reloads and does it again. So I don't think that's necessarily like a froth signal for the market as a whole. I think it's more a froth signal for the meme sector. If, for example, like if I like assuming I'm right and Dogecoin runs right and it gets frothy and whatever, I think that would be much more of a signal for the entire market. Just because bigger players can play that too. You have a bunch of new people coming in, and that's more of a froth signal. So,
So you
like, I
need
think
like zoomed out metrics essentially, right? Like
yes,
maybe meme trading volume as a percentage of perps, market cap changes, and how many of those are meme coins, like that type of stuff, more so than
yeah,
okay.
and just something that people can access basically, because the market is bigger now, and you have a bunch of people that can actually just not trade these memes that are
Yes.
significant enough. Like you have these funds, you have like Murid, for example, like chilling his like low cap whatever meme
Based.
coins, right? Yeah, like that's not the norm, right? You don't have these kind of types of people usually trading these memes. Like most people are just doing other things, and there's nothing or hasn't been nothing interesting other than those, right? So I don't think there's necessarily like the behavior is the same. We basically need something that everyone can play. Like if we have a meme season, we need big memes to do something too, and then you can get froth that actually translates into, okay, this has a meaning for the rest of the market, not only for memes. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. So like I don't necessarily see it as froth signals. I see it basically as a bunch of people going to the casino.
So we're early. Is all I can
Uh,
derive
I
from that,
mean,
Don.
technically, yes.
Technically. It's like with DeFi. Remember when all these like fucking Bitwise DeFi index, whatever
Yeah,
shit started coming
exactly.
out? It's like, okay, the suits are here, pack it up, it's over.
Yeah, and I think basically, I mean, that's my thesis, right? Like the
Yeah.
moment Dogecoin pumps, I think it's basically over for this cycle.
You
But I
mean like
also,
pumps, right? Not
yeah,
one.
yeah, like
Okay.
if Dogecoin goes to like if Dogecoin goes to $1.52, I think that'd be the end of the cycle. But that's kind of what, like, I'm kind of guessing we're really close to the end of it. Like the small players have already been going completely mental in the memes. Now we just need the big players and the new people to go mental, and I think that's
Yeah.
basically it for this
Then
cycle.
there's no marginal buyers left.
Yeah, I mean, who else is gonna buy, right? So
Yeah.
basically, that's where I think we're in the market cycle, and that's why I'm playing Doge, because I think
Interesting.
that's a play for those people to actually have
Yeah, I mean it's coherent. It makes sense.
some fun too. And then I think it, like, we actually get like a proper pullback. We get like a bunch of like boring bear market kind of price action, and go from there.
Yeah, but it always
I
has to be centered around the meta, right? Like if memes are
Yeah.
the meta, you're better off gauging where we are cyclically based on what everyone's trading. Just like
Yep.
keeping an eye on NFTs was useful, keeping an eye on DeFi 1.0 was useful, keeping an eye on Sol Luna AVAX was useful, so on and so forth. I just think in this case you slot in memes to that point.
Yeah, but right now they haven't really hit escape velocity yet. They've just been like a pocket where people get like crypto natives
Crypto
gamble
native,
and
yeah.
lose money.
Dude, we're so
Because
early.
like
You make me so bullish, Don. Thank you.
I mean, I'm happy to help, but I don't know if, I'm not sure if I'm actually right, like it could just be that that's all the cycle has, like maybe, and this is the kind of counter thesis to what I just proposed, is maybe we fucked over retail and other people that have not, like the normies basically, over so much in the past cycles, that the view on crypto is so negative now that people cannot be baited into it no matter what you do. And then you have like this situation where you try everything to bait these people in. It doesn't really happen. And then you have a bunch of people overexposed trying to make them come in.
It like stays
And
PvP basically, right? Fails to
yeah,
reach escape velocity or whatever.
and if a bunch of people are betting on people coming in right from the outside, they're all on the wrong side of that trade, because if they don't come in, that trade just doesn't materialize, and then just rug
Yes.
pulls beyond
I mean,
anything.
that was 2021 to some extent, right? Like the whole institutional, all these balance sheets, banks, Tesla is only the first of many, etc.
Yeah, yeah.
are going to
I
buy
mean, that was
BTC.
that. Yeah.
And we just like front run. We ended up front running people who never got here in the first place and had no
Yep.
intention of coming. That's always
Yep.
the risk. You essentially price things under the assumption I am early and I'm front running all these future flows. But then the future flows never come, then there are no marginal buyers left within the PvP/crypto native ecosystem, and that's it.
Yeah.
You'll have to end up dumping on each other. So the counter thesis is essentially that, while we're buying stuff up on the anticipation of retail coming, we are the retail, and no one else is coming.
Yeah. And I think this is a decent argument. Honestly, like it's really hard to say that that's just a bad argument, because everyone's kind of lost money in crypto now, right? Like in 2017, like people were like seeing crypto and they're like, oh shit, like this is new, this is exciting. 2020, people were like, oh, this whole DeFi thing, like maybe that's gonna change the entire world. And now it's like very, like, it's not like we're shilling anything with substance to anyone, right? It's literally just like, this is a casino. So one, like, obviously a lot of people like to gamble, but that's a smaller subset of people than attracting everyone, like the gamblers and the people that believe in something. And two, all of these people that are not in crypto, like they've dabbled in it before and they've lost money in it before. So I think it's not the worst argument that we're just not going to be able to attract new people in. I'm just choosing to give it a shot just based on how well everything's set up for my thesis, I think. But I could be completely wrong. The good thing is,
believe in something, Don.
yeah, the good thing is you just need to be early finding these kind of ideas, right? And this does tend to like when you give it a little bit of a think and you're a little bit early to it, even if it never materializes, you were early enough to be able to get out of the idea without taking too much of a haircut. So like that's a good part about like not jumping on the momentum, but rather like actually figuring out what could happen in the future, right? And I think that's what the really good traders, like the big guys and the really good traders actually do, rather than like looking at the lines on the chart and whatever. They're looking at like future narratives that could kind of play out, and then they position themselves. And by positioning themselves, like the big smart guys, they make the lines look nicely, right? And it's not because they're like, hey, I'm gonna buy, so I'm gonna buy in a way that this and this support holds. Like that's bullshit. But by buying, other people see, hey, someone is buying this, and then they buy, and it's a whole thing. Like that's how crypto kind of goes. If the idea is good enough, right? If the idea is bad and you buy something that has a bunch of people that wanted to get out for months, and now you're buying into, like, you're giving them exit liquidity, you're actually the one that's holding the back. So it has its advantages and disadvantages. But I think like if you get like, or want to get really good, this is kind of the way you have to think about it. Like future narratives, what can take off, what cannot.
Yes.
Like,
and you're buying attention in that example as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think you made a really interesting point about the benefits of being early. One example of it is, even if you get, whatever narrative you had in mind ends up getting there 60% of the way or 70%, if you're there from, let's say, 0 to 10%, you still caught like an enormous, huge chunk of the move, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the people who ended up subscribing to the narrative at the local extreme, like, they think it's going to go to 100%, they agree with you, but they buy at 60, but it only ever got to 60 and that was the top. You make money even though you were quote unquote wrong, just by being early. Whereas if you're late and wrong, there's no way to there's no saving grace at that point.
No, yeah, exactly.
Awesome. I have coins here, and I don't know if you're gonna show me any of them. I think you talked about most of the stuff you found interesting. I'm assuming BTC, ETH, Dogecoin is about the extent of how much you give a shit about this market, and also your attention span and everything else.
Yeah. But
anything else jump out at you? Anything on your watch list or has been shilled where you're like, hey, this isn't the worst thing in the world?
Not really, no.
You were being nice to the whiff guys on Twitter not too long ago.
Oh, I mean, I was just having fun, because I mean, I've been saying like, hey, whiff doesn't look bad for like weeks now, right? And It's gone up since I did, it's up 60% since I said it was decent. And then I was just making a lighthearted joke, and the whiff guys really didn't like it. But yeah, whiff, I mean, it's still not bad, right? Made a new high, or like an equal high ish at 2.8.
I mean, he's doing this like hooking uptrend structure on the daily, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it did hit $2.83 ish. Understandable profit taking there, but
yeah,
the fact that it came back from where it went, I think in itself is pretty impressive.
I think so too.
So many of those memes have similar charts, except they just never recover from the $1 equivalent and made their way back down to 40 cents or whatever. So I think that's non-trivial. Cat coins had a bit of a moment of spotlight before we pivoted to like 3 different things in Popcat and Mew. But you can tell, I mean, dude, it's still thin, The market is just completely unable to support more than really 1.5 narratives at a time. So that's what makes like active trading, this kind of stuff, very great, a fantastic opportunity if you're properly locked in and getting those rotations, which sometimes last less than a week. But I think I think medium frequency for this really sucks, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like if you're high frequency and you're always monitoring this stuff and rotating and looking at flows, etc., there's a lot of trading to be done. If you're sorry, what the fuck did I just say? Yeah, if you're high
Yeah.
frequency, it's good because there's a lot of shit going on. If you're low frequency, I think it's also good if you have like an overarching thesis for like memes and how the cycle is going to play out and where we are, then that by definition requires less active management, and hopefully you've picked stuff that facilitate that. Like you're not going to go to some new Pump.fun Solana shitter and then be like, okay, time to be passive. It's, hold it for like 6 months as the meme coin super cycle progresses. That's not what you're doing. So like if you've got decent picks and some sort of thesis, then low frequency is absolutely fine because there are rotations within memes, but not from memes, if that makes sense. So that's good. But I think medium frequency is where you get fucked up, where you do a set and forget, and you come back a couple of weeks later for some of these positions with tighter invalidations or really short-term theses, and then the meta's changed like 4 times since then. It's a shit position to be in. So I think you either need to be really locked in, or you need to be kind of hands off and have a larger guiding star as far as where this shit is going. How's it going to be repriced? What are going to be the strong performers? But the medium diddling in the middle answer, I think, is pretty terrible with how short and quick some of these rotations have been.
I 100% agree. I mean, generally, we have so many big memes now, right? Like you have Popcat, you have Whiff, you have Bonk, you have Sheep, you have like it's a little bit oversaturated, I think, on the like bigger meme front. The smaller meme front has always been oversaturated, right? Like there's infinite basically of smaller memes. So like it's a little bit difficult being looking at the sector and being really interested at this point. I think like the memes with a story, like the goat thing, right? Like that's something that might stick around for a little bit, and that might do well. But the others that are just like haha, like it has a hat, haha, it has like it's a cat instead of a dog. I'm not entirely sure if that's gonna do so well, honestly, because just by the way of how saturated that market feels, unless we get big retail flows, big other like igniting factors, I think you're kind of shit out of luck on those. Like they might still trade better than other altcoins, but it kind of like the good times of like the bigger memes to me seems like you have to be a little bit more selective, or have like a big influx of new people come in, and then maybe you get bailed out. But I don't like. I look at these, and I mean, I'm not saying these charts are bad, right? Like for example, with like reclaiming what it has reclaimed, I think that's good, and the chart is generally not bad. It's just now that you get like there was like 2 or 3 names in town, and now there's like 10, and then there's gonna be like in a couple of months there's gonna be 15, 20, 30 of bigger memes. I think the returns that you're gonna get on these is gonna kind of get closer to what you would traditionally get on normal cryptos, right? Because the memes kind of been outperforming everything else. I think they're gonna kind of turn into normal cryptos in a way where they just kind of like do whatever the market does.
Yeah.
So I think that's basically what's going to happen from now on with like Pepe, with like Popcat, like with these big ones. I think they're going to do more what the market does and less of how they used to trade.
Yeah.
And then you're going to get like a few coins or memes or whatever that hit the sweet spot that might still go crazy. And then for me, like I said, I mean, there's a reason why I bought Doge, just because I think like you have a bunch of these like mid-tier memes now. You have one high tier, and it's Doge, right? Like that's by far the biggest. And then you have a bunch of like lower ones. And I think they're gonna kind of like fracture liquidity and where people are gonna look. Because if I wanted to buy a meme that's bigger market cap, like I'd have too many choices now. To actually make any of them pump significantly, right? Like if you split your buys up, like I think that's a little bit doesn't really work.
That's almost standard though, right? For how a lot of these metas develop, is that early on there are a few kind of blatant outperformers, and then if you're early enough, that sector as a whole grows, and even the copycats, no pun intended, grow. And then you have like a larger number of incumbents. They end up being pretty high cap at that point, and then you just have to go out further and further on the risk curve to try to capture similar returns. Because the people who were early to those, they essentially took the risk, right? And made money there. But then if you're late to that narrative, then those things are already big enough, the sector is already wide enough that you have to take riskier bets on newer shit. Like if you're going into WIF now, you're not going to get the same WIF returns as you got from 10 cents or whatever. It's just
Yeah, not even close.
Unbelievably unlikely.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we are in the market cycle, really.
So Dogecoin to $1, and then it's all over. Is all I got from this show, Don.
I mean, if Dogecoin goes to $1, your meme's probably gonna go up too. That's the good thing, right? For all the meme people, just because it's like Bitcoin going up.
Yes.
It might suck out liquidity, and I think that would be best case, honestly. Like if you get like a move to like those kind of memes, like Dogecoin, for example, like if that sucked out the liquidity out of the rest of the market, you could get good entries on the other memes if you wanted to for like one last try once Dogecoin slows down. Like I think that would be best case. And then I think a lot of these memes would make new highs, right? Like basically Dogecoin goes up a lot, would need Bitcoin to go up a little bit. And that would lead to a bunch of these other memes also doing new highs, right? So I'm not saying like I'm bearish on these necessarily, especially combined with the fact that I actually do think like Dogecoin could go up. I'm just saying, just generally, I think we're in the end stages of this cycle, and that doesn't mean like, hey, you're gonna have to you're not gonna make more money, because the end stages are the craziest part usually. Like that's where most of the money is made and lost. So like that's kind of how it feels like to me. I could be completely wrong, and I might change my mind when we get higher up. So take it all with a grain of salt. Don't listen to a duck on the internet.
Dude, do you remember when Dogecoin was topping some of the fucking insane shit that was going on? Like it was literally sucking liquidity out from BTC.
Oh yeah, literally, like that's people don't, and this is why I'm saying like, hey, this thing can run like to above $1 if you get eyes on it, because it can literally take money from every other cryptocurrency out there, right? Like it's not only the people that from outside, like it can, people sold Bitcoin last time to buy Doge in not small numbers
because of SNL. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fucking so stupid. This market is so fucking stupid at the end of the day. But yeah, same with XRP. Like
yes.
Back in 2017, like these bigger moves, they get so crazy because everyone in a sector that is already hot looks at the same thing,
yes.
And then it gets completely crazy. And predicting those things is impossible. It's like predicting whether something is gonna go viral or not on the internet. Like yes, you can have a guess, and you can be like, hey, this fits the zeitgeist, right? But you can never know. Like this is like an entirely different beast in itself, and sometimes stuff goes viral and you're like wondering why the fuck did it, and sometimes something goes viral and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But at the end of the day, whether something is going to go viral or not, it's very hard to predict. So you're going to just have to position yourself in a way where you're okay if it goes, and where you're okay if it doesn't. So
yeah, I mean, we were speaking about getting 60% of the way there with grand narratives, right? And how if you're early enough and you pay that risk premium, you can still make money even if you're wrong in a sort of consequentialist sense of the word. I actually think like the whole Murad approach, whatever you may think of it, is at least philosophically a good example of that, right? Like he's bought a bunch of these coins, and his thesis is obviously that there's going to be a flippening between altcoins and like all the VC coins, like CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, whatever, is going to get turned completely. These things, if he's making comparisons between meme coins and all these ghost chain mega L1s at billions, etc., and saying, well, meme coins, not only are they going to flip those, but they have a lot more viral potential because they're like cults and religions. They can go to trillions, so on and so forth. But like in his case, if he's 50% right, it's still like a mega trade, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be fully right to make money because he's bought like sufficiently early relative to where we are on that 0 to 100% journey type of thing. That's like a practical example of what we were talking about. It's simply, this even applies to TA, I feel like, right? Like, remember when 30K was breaking? And the argument at the time was, well, this is like a mega massive range reclaim, and the other side of the range is like 60K or whatever. Even if that didn't fully play out, and there was all that ETF fuckery and pullbacks around 45K, but if you were sufficiently early to buying 30K on anticipation that it could go to 60K, even if you rode it out halfway, that's still a fucking fantastic trade. And that's what the market essentially pays you for, right? Like taking like an extra step or taking that additional risk when it's not entirely clear what's going to happen. Like you're not getting paid for longing 59.8 saying, oh, well, 60K is close, right? Like you're not super early at that point. There isn't much to capture. But there are these pockets where if you're right, the payoff structure is asymmetric, and more importantly, even if you're mostly wrong or fractionally wrong, you can still make a lot of money. And I think that applies to like the investing stuff. It applies to trading stuff. I even think it applies to entries, right? Like if you want to buy in spots where you're like, okay, even if this turns into like a shitty inflection point and the market turns around here, I'm not going to lose my shirt completely. Like maybe there's a good chance I'll be able to get out at a gain or even at break even if I wanted to. Like I think that kind of mentality in general is quite a nice one to have. Like how wrong can I be but still make money type of thing.
Yeah. It's actually one of my favorite ways to go about it. Yeah, that's why I like these massive breakdowns, because I'm like, this is just the same way of thinking, right? Like when you get this big flush, you're like, if I'm buying here, I think this is the bottom. So this is how I go about it. Like I'm like, I think this is the bottom. We had a massive flush, but if I'm wrong, like this is gonna mean revert most likely anyway. And then like there's a million things that kind of aid me in that buy, where I'm like, even if I'm completely wrong that this is the bottom, there's a good chance that I'm going to make a bunch of money. And it's happened the entire, like when we broke down from 70K all the way down to 16, right? Do you remember like how like people were making fun of me because I was buying like a couple of times, like, oh, maybe this is the bottom, right? After like big moves. And I was like, and I said the same thing, like every single time I was like, oh, this like, it's either the bottom or we're going to nuke massively from here, right? And I bought every time, and like on the stairway down, I bought like 3 or 4 times, didn't lose money on a single one of those trades actually, even though I was wrong every single time, right? Like it was not the bottom, it was just a bottom on the way down, but I had the potential to just kind of be like hold that trade if it was the bottom, and given it was not, but I bought early enough, I was like fine with getting out. And I think that's like one of the better ways to kind of fade. Like when you're fading a trend, that's the only way to do it, I think. Like when you have a downtrend, and you're just like buying when you think like, hey, oh yeah, there's like a good up move, maybe this is the one that's gonna turn it around, that's gonna lose you money most of the time. But when you have like a downtrend and it nukes massively, like, oh, this is just like completely displaced from reality, like just makes no sense, because basically a bunch of people got blown out. Like it's a very different way of thinking, right? Like it can be the bottom, doesn't have to be. You're going to make money in either way, most of the time.
Not financial advice, not legal advice, not investing advice. Past
No.
performance does not guarantee future returns and all that other stuff after you said you're going to make money most of the time.
Yeah, the market has changed a lot too. So like all of
Yes.
those past experiences might not apply anymore.
Yeah, agreed. Don, I had some news articles, but honestly, we've kind of covered them in passing. One is about Pump.fun launching a token in the future, and also like a improved trading interface. So I think that'll be interesting to monitor at the very least. Like there are a few teams like that, like Pump.fun, Moonshot, etc., who are essentially trying to do what your Doge thesis requires, which is to make it easier to onboard people. Now, what they're getting onboarded into is a slightly different question.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want anyone to get onboarded into Pump.fun because that's the worst place to be. I think if you send people, like retail people, into Pump.fun this cycle,
especially
like
now,
if that's the
right?
meta,
Like,
yeah,
now.
if that's
Oh
the
my God.
meta for like how we play out the end of the cycle, it's gonna be the worst cycle of all of them. Like the worst losses, because literally everyone can launch a token, and you're just gonna have a bunch of people like get onboarded, and then they launch their own tokens, they get their friends, and like everyone fucking loses money. I think that'd be cataclysmic, and that would kind of end the whole like I don't think it would end well. Like that's the worst place to get onboarded to.
Great. I mean, it is more extractive on average, right? If you especially like the state of the trenches now versus even 6 months ago, from the little reading I do, and there's some nice dashboards on Dune, etc., about how many coins make it to Radium, like all that type of stuff. it's very rough. Whereas if you're getting onboarded in 2017, you're getting onboarded onto a centralized exchange, and everything on that centralized exchange is going up, like every day.
Yeah.
That's a fundamentally different experience, I feel like, to what getting onboarded this way would be.
I mean, all the rug pulls do, like, what the fuck? Like, back in 17, it didn't really matter if the team suddenly disappeared or whatever. Like, it wouldn't rug pull,
Yeah, it'd be
right?
fucking
Because
better if they disappeared. Like,
yeah, but now it's like it's just like it's so extractive
yeah, it's extractive.
everywhere,
That's the
and
thing.
it's so like there's so many methods to PvP in this thing, and people have gotten so sophisticated in scamming each other too.
Very
It's a little bit
sophisticated.
scary.
Yeah, if you
Like,
just compare like how insider laden the average centralized exchange, like Poloniex Bittrex listed coin was in 2017, that's a much better place to get onboarded for most people versus getting on board into Pump.fun. It feels like this is what I sort of struggle with Memecoins to some extent. I mean, part of it is obviously like the massive asymmetry and conflict of interest. Like, get DM from a team being like, "Hey, we're launching this, and we can give you this much of the supply, and all these other KOLs are on board. Join the Telegram." I fucking ignore them. Or what I've started doing, Dom, which is quite funny, and I've shared screenshots of this with you. I'll often ask like, "Hey, who is which KOLs
yeah.
have you partnered with?" And they'll just give me names, and I'm like, "Oh, fuck me." And then, to nobody's surprise, all the tweets pop up at the same time from the usual culprits, like a few days later. But another thing that makes it difficult when it comes to meme coins is that, on the one hand, they're a fantastic example of like where you should be looking for edge, right? Because the whole Dogecoin whatever thesis, and when you've spoken about runes, when we used to speak about NFTs, there's a lot of edge in the fact that these big, very liquid, very sophisticated funds, unless they're trading on their own personal account, but that's not the fund at that point, they just can't. They don't have the mandate to trade these things.
They need to go big.
They need to go big. Yeah, it's actually their size for them is a detriment. Whereas for you, it's an edge. The fact that you're small, nimble, can get in and out, whatever. Whereas the liquidity and market cap for a lot of these things, you just don't have. They can't compete with you essentially. So you're competing with worse traders, which means the probability that you have an edge is higher. But then the other side of that coin is like just how fucking insider laden these things are now, and how professionally extractive the trenches have become. So like if you take a zoomed out view, you're like, oh well, meme coins are fantastic. I think in many cases that they are, especially from a pure trading perspective. Some of the way these things sort of respond to price action because they're so retail laden and so on and so forth. There's a lot of alpha there. On the other side of it, if you pick wrong, essentially, it's actually worse than trading against fucking Wintermute in perps, for example. It's like it's difficult. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe it comes down to coin selection. You might think, oh, we'll just trade the bonds on centralized exchanges. Like, well, it kind of defeats the purpose because you're not going to be super early to something on a centralized exchange in most cases. I don't know what the fucking answer is. I just know that there's this weird trade-off where it's the meta, so you should be trading it. Also, the big guys at the moment for most of these can't compete or are limited, especially if you're in the actual trench side of things versus centralized exchange listing. So you should trade there because there's a lot of alpha and edge. But at the same time, at this point, it's become so professionally extractive that whatever edge you think you might have for the first two things might be wiped out completely if you choose the wrong coin. So like, how do you fucking square that circle, Don? I have no idea.
Me neither. And I mean, the people are like, oh yeah, the VCs are not there, so they cannot take advantage of us. They're like, yes, but also like you have a bunch of influencers, KOLs, whatever, that are 10 times worse, honestly. Like, people are like, oh, the VCs are the worst thing in the world. Literally, the influencers and KOLs are a million times worse. Like, the morals that I'm seeing in some of these people, I mean, I'm like, what the fuck? And the VCs, they have like, and I'm neither really, right? Like, I never really took advantage of my Twitter, and you are not either. Like, we never really took advantage of our Twitter reach, right? To do
We're
any of
fucking
these kind of
idiots, Don.
things. Yeah, and we never really took our Twitter reach to do the VC thing either, right? So it's like we're neither of those. But I can tell you that the VCs, they have vesting, they have an interest in the coin surviving for a little bit at least, right? Whereas these KOLs, what they do is they take a bunch of the supply, and then just basically dump it as fast as they can into the biggest up candle that they can find, and then they wipe their hands clean and they walk off. Like, I literally think that the KOLs are worse than the VCs, and I will not be convinced otherwise. Like, this is just like, the VCs are not great, and I think they're just generally also extractive in the space and have been. The KOLs are worse. So you're
Agree.
kind of like you're choosing between like two evils, and people try to justify
Yes.
that the memes are so much better because there's no VCs, not realizing that the memes are where the scammers are, like the straight up scammers, which are always going to be worse than the VCs, and the KOLs, which I mean at this point you might as well call scammers as well. So
I mean,
you
you've
kind of like
replaced an evil with a worse evil, I feel
yeah,
like.
yeah,
But
and
because the
people
naming is different, you feel better about it.
yeah, because you can tell yourself that hey, the evil V like this is how it always works. You find
Yes.
you look for like something that you can blame, right? And then you're like, this is I blame these people for not having made money in this, and this is so much better, but it's not. Like you replaced one religion with another, and the new one is more violent and more fucked up than the one before.
Yes.
So
Great. The other point was about Bitcoin ETFs doing well, so that's
yeah,
good. Please, number
that's
go
really
up.
good.
That's
Yeah,
really the only. And also, the S&P is on a fucking tear, right?
yeah, it's
It's like,
insane.
can we just like catch up, please? That would be nice. Like all-time high weekly chill trend on the S&P. That's something to aim for. And the last one was about the Market Andreessen funded AI bot becomes billionaire after Fartcoin holdings rally.
Great.
Yes, I know, Don. I know. So that's all there is to it. That's all I've got. I think this has been a interesting episode. Sorry to our audience for meandering from the weekly time frame into bullshit philosophy as always halfway through, but I think we pulled it back a little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit. Any final questions, comments, concerns from you, Don?
No, I don't think so.
No, I think neither. Before you click off, leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave us a comment. And we read through all the comments, even though we're terrible at responding. We appreciate those of you who leave us your thoughts. Hope you all have a wonderful remainder of your weekend. And see you on Monday, Wednesday, Friday next week, if the stars align, because that's the standard, apparently. And thank you to Woo for somehow continuing to work with us, given whatever this podcast has become.
Yeah, much love to them. Cannot believe it.
Can we get a bye-bye, Don?
Bye-bye.